NBC10 at Issue starts now.
At Issue this Sunday morning, party politics. Two Pennsylvania elected officials are taking on roles that could help shape the future of their parties, one in Pennsylvania, the other nationally. Good morning, I'm Lauren Mayk. Welcome to NBC10 at Issue. Two Pennsylvania legislators are now doing double duty as they step into leadership positions with their political parties. Today, I'm speaking with both of them. Democratic State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta from Philadelphia was elected as a vice chair of the National Democratic Party. And Republican State Senator Greg Rothman was elected chairman of the Republican Party of Pennsylvania. Rothman was elected to the state Senate in 2022. Before that, he was in the State House of Representatives. He's from Cumberland County. Before getting into politics, he worked in real estate and remains a partner in a real estate firm. State Senator Greg Rothman joins us now. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about what is ahead for you in this new role. You're coming in at a time when Republicans in Pennsylvania had a pretty good year, won the state for President Trump, won a Senate race, boosted your registration, won Bucks County. What do you think the Republican brand is right now?
Well, I think the November election was the best election of my lifetime. And I've been through a lot, including Ronald Reagan's win in 1980 and winning back the House of Representatives in 1994, and a couple Bush terms, 3 Bush presidencies. But what we did in Pennsylvania was historical. And so now the Republican Party has to deliver. And we have to deliver by keeping the promises we made. We have to make sure that President Trump, and already in the first few weeks with his cabinet selections and with his executive orders and actions and his agenda, to make sure that we see the economy pick up, to see our foreign policy improve, to see prices come down, and people to feel more secure and safe in their homes. And if all those things happen, then the Republicans will continue to build on the successes in November, and that's my objective as the party chairman.
Yeah, that's a long list of things, and we know that voters put President Trump and a Republican Congress in Washington in place. And they are expecting certain things. They do want to see their grocery prices go down. They do want to see their lives be made better in whatever way they are looking for. Do you feel like you are seeing that move forward? Are you seeing signs of that happening?
Yeah, we had polling in Pennsylvania that showed the border was the number 2 issue after the economy, and a wide open border. And clearly, crossings at our southern border have changed. We're seeing prices come down in the fact that people have more confidence in the economy. Hopefully, we'll have more production, and more production will create more activity, which means actually with more productivity, prices actually come down. And you can see what Doge and Elon Musk is doing. The people in Pennsylvania said the federal government's spending too much money and printing too much money and borrowing too much money. And so finding a lot of efficiencies and wasteful money, whether it's foreign policy or foreign aid at USAID, or, last week talking about, federal employees who haven't been working from offices and not responding to requests of what are the 5 things you did last week. Those are things that I think will have effects. The people of Pennsylvania and the people of the nation will say that President Trump is delivering on his promises. And if, look, we're going to have peace in the Middle East and hostages already coming home. We're going to have peace, looks like, in Ukraine, and the Russia and Putin will pull out of Ukraine. I mean, those are all positive things that the president campaigned on. And if he delivers, then the voters will reward him.
You mentioned Doge, and I was at a rally just recently with Congressman Brendan Boyle and some federal workers and some union representatives there, and he was talking about some of the federal jobs being lost. And he said they're not federal jobs, they're Pennsylvania jobs, they're Philadelphia jobs. And we have seen some federal workers in Pennsylvania laid off already. How do you feel about the potential and the reality of losing jobs in Pennsylvania for people who work for the federal government?
Well, it just depends on what they were doing and what they are doing. I mean, the reports...
There were about 400 who were working for the IRS. We do know that.
the IRS. Well, look, I'm a conservative Republican. I don't think we need more IRS agents. That's especially when we have I think it was 8,000 IRS agents or 80,000 IRS agents that were hired. So I think we have to look at making government more efficient. I mean, we cannot continue to have an economy where we have trillions of dollars in debt. The people of Pennsylvania pay too much in taxes now. The money they send to Washington to go to the federal government, means less money they have to pay for their rent or buy houses. We have a housing crisis in Pennsylvania. I'm sure in your area too. Young people can't afford to buy houses. 30-year-olds telling me I'll never be able to afford to buy a house. That's not right either. And so if we need to sacrifice as businesses and families, it's okay for the federal government to sacrifice too. I mean, and that starts with the labor force. So if you can't, as Elon Musk asked, tell me the 5 things you did last week, which I'm sure you can tell me the 5 things you did this morning, and so can I, then you probably are taking advantage of a system where you're not being held accountable. And that's what the private business would do, and I think that's what the federal government has every right to do. We owe that to the taxpayers.
Just to be clear, the folks who were laid off in Philadelphia, the IRS workers that I was referring to, the 400, that was before that email went out. That was prior to that.
Yeah, and look, I don't know the details of that. We have a lot of federal workers here in the Harrisburg area at the Navy Ships Parts Control Center, and throughout our region, they're all hardworking and can tell you exactly what they did the last week. So, is our federal government too big? Yes. Should we be looking at ways to trim the federal government without sacrificing services or the protection of the people of the country? Yes. We can do that without sacrificing that, but we have to get our spending under control. It's just that's why we have the prices we have and inflation we have, is because we spend too much money.
Let's talk about what is ahead for the Pennsylvania Republican Party and what's on your agenda. What's your first goal in this new role?
So we have a trend that's taken place. When I first got involved in politics, there were 1.5 million more Democrats than Republicans. Right now, we've got it under 200,000. So our goal in the next 2 years is to have parity amongst the registered voters. So just as many Republicans as Democrats. I think that'll help us in winning statewide. Ultimately, we measure success by whether or not you win elections. And we're going to have judicial retention races in 2025. And then in 2026, we have a goal of bring back the majority to the House of Representatives in our state, and also to make sure that Josh Shapiro is not reelected, which may be tough order, but we actually think that that's a possibility. So
how do you do that? How do you beat Governor Josh Shapiro?
Well, look, if Tracy Garrity gets the same number of votes that she did this year in 2 years, and Josh Shapiro gets the votes that he got 2 years ago, she'd be our next governor. So would you
like to see her be your nominee?
Look, I'm for whoever our nominee is. My job is to make sure we have an infrastructure in place to deliver an election to whoever the Republican is. But you certainly can't discount Stacey Garrity. She's the largest vote getter in the history of Pennsylvania, Democrat or Republican. She's done an outstanding job as treasurer and was reelected overwhelmingly. And she's a veteran, a military veteran, long time serving in the military, was a retired colonel, involved in a successful business in the private sector, international business. I mean, she has all the qualities to be a great governor. So, but I'm looking at just making sure that we have the infrastructure in place to elect whatever Republican is our nominee.
Your colleague, State Senator Doug Mastriano, who previously ran for governor, is reportedly, according to an interview he did recently, considering running again for Pennsylvania governor. Do you think that he can beat Governor Shapiro?
Yeah, there was a year before a year ago today, people said there was no way that Donald Trump would even be the nominee, let alone beat Joe Biden. And remember, that's who was going to be the nominee. So a lot of things can happen in politics. But if you just look at the numbers that took place in the November election, Republicans can beat Josh Shapiro.
Would you have any concerns about Senator Mastriano being your nominee, given what the numbers were in the previous gubernatorial race?
Look, you have to have the resources and the infrastructure. And Senator Mastriano's campaign, I don't know, maybe spent $1 million compared to, I think the governor probably spent over $30 million. I mean, it's difficult to win that type of battle, regardless of who your candidate is. So, but I think that Josh Shapiro can be beaten.
A lot to talk about, a lot ahead. I look forward to talking to you this year and in the coming years in your new role. Pennsylvania Republican Party Chairman, Senator Greg Rothman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren.
Still ahead, we'll go across the political aisle as I talk to a Philadelphia politician who is now serving in a national role. The position State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta now holds with the Democratic National Committee and how he plans to help shape the party's future.
This is NBC10 at Issue.
Before the break, I talked to the new chairman of Pennsylvania's Republican Party. But another state legislator is also taking on a prominent party role. Pennsylvania State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta was recently elected as a vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. He has served in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives since 2019. He represents part of Philadelphia, and you may recall he ran for the U.S. Senate in 2022 and lost the Democratic nomination to John Fetterman. He also ran for Auditor General last year. And here now to talk about his new role and the challenges ahead for Democrats is State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta. Welcome. Great to see you.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
So let's first of all explain to people what this role is and what you're going to be doing, because this is a vice chair role with the national party. What do you do in that role? What's the function of it? Yeah, listen, we're in a critical moment, not just for the Democratic Party. We're in a critical moment for the country. And every 4 years, the Democratic Party, like I think all national parties, get together and not just have a convention, but a couple of months after that, we elect new party leadership. And so that happened in National Harbor, Maryland, and it was a huge field, and I came out as one of the vice chairs of the party to help lead us in this critical moment where we are fighting for our democracy, fighting to lower costs for working people and working families, and taking on, frankly, an administration that has spent every single day raising costs for the American people only so they can cut taxes for millionaires and billionaires. And so I'm really excited to be a part of this new leadership team that is really about reinvigorating the Democratic Party and making sure we're in a position to confront the challenges that we have in front of us. What do you think the Democratic brand is right now? The Democratic brand is what it's always been, about being the party that gives a damn about working people and working families. People don't have to take Malcolm's word for it. Just a couple of days ago, we saw the Republicans in Congress pass the framework of a budget that is going to cut almost $1 trillion from Medicaid, that is going to cut almost $250 billion out of food stamps. We don't know what all the details will be. It will. It will. That is their legislative language. That is what they put forward. And this is, again, it's not Malcolm's opinion. These are independent tax analysts who have looked at this, who have talked about what this plan will be. Even Tom Massey, who was the one Republican to vote against the bill, voted against it in part because he said, even using the most generous math from the Republican leadership who pushed this plan forward, it would raise the deficit year after year after year, all so that we can pay tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans at the expense of the middle class. As you and I sit here, eggs are almost $9 So okay, and that's just an example of what we've seen in this administration. If you're saying that the brand for Democrats is the party that cares about people, or whatever wording you choose. That fights for working people and working families. That's right. Do you think that's the way people saw Democrats in 2024? Listen. Because they chose something else. Listen, in this moment, we need to do a couple of things. First of all, I didn't run for vice chair to be Monday morning quarterback. The only quarterback I care about is Jalen Hurts, who's MVP, by the way. I'm worried about the future. And this party is fearlessly focused on the future. The next election is not going to be about the last election. It's a military principle about not fighting the last war. But if you don't learn from the last election, it's hard to win the next one. Listen, there is a cottage industry
that I'm going to constantly push back against of crapping on Democrats every day. If you want to get on TV, write an op-ed about how Democrats suck. I'm not going to spend the next 4 years apologizing for being a Democrat, apologizing for being against tax breaks for billionaires at the expense of cutting Head Start, at the expense of kicking seniors out of skilled nursing facilities, at the expense of taking away health care for kids and for pregnant women. That's what the Republicans did. Democrats voted in unison against it. And so for folks who say, well, the parties are the same, very clear distinction on how the parties are not the same. What we have seen since this administration has been in charge, as I said, eggs are over $9. We have seen consumer confidence go into the gutter. We have seen unemployment rise for the first time in a long time. And we've also seen an administration that is effectively run by a billionaire from South Africa. So I don't know that that's what the American people voted for. We have an opportunity right now to talk about the future, and Democrats are doing that. And that's why in every single special election, including in ruby red Trump districts, you've seen Democrats win and overperform. And it's a part of the reason you saw the chair. The first stop he made as chair was to Western Pennsylvania to campaign for hopefully a future colleague, Dan Guggenauer, who's going to replace Matt Gergely, who so tragically passed, because we understand the importance of building this party from the bottom up.
DEI has obviously been something that has been a target by the Trump administration. And we have seen some companies, some schools make some changes in their policies, or at least on the surface say they're making changes in their policies. We'll see what that actually means. What do you think the future of those types of policies are?
Well, one of the things I think is important as we have this conversation, that we don't call things, put them in acronyms. When we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, a part of what we're talking about is America. Out of many, one is this basic idea that people should be actually judged by the content of their character, by their skill sets, and not locked out of job opportunities or the ability to start that small business and grow it, simply because of who they are. When I worked at the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce for a number of years, I will tell you the number one people who engaged and benefited in the diversity, equity, and inclusion work were women entrepreneurs who had incredible talent, who had incredible ideas, but would get to that bank to try to get that loan to expand their enterprise, and were not given the same types of loan packages, and in some instances were completely turned away. You look at folks who do big investments in companies and startups and other investments, and you look at the statistics and you see so many people who are completely locked out. And so for a number of years now, you have had people say, you know what, America's better when it's fair. Pennsylvania's better when it's fair. It's better when we don't leave any incredible talent on the bench. We need them on the field. We need as many people as possible opening new businesses, being what we are as Americans, innovators, people who go out there and take good ideas and actualize them. That's good for our economy. It's good for our communities. It's good for our future.
State Representative Malcolm Pinata, thanks so much for your time. Good to see you.
I appreciate it.
Well, Philadelphia's mayor is set to deliver her budget address in a couple of weeks. I visited neighborhoods across the city to see how residents think the money should be spent. We'll hear from them coming up next.
This is NBC10 at Issue.
Philadelphia Mayor Sherrell Parker will unveil her 2026 budget in less than 2 weeks. I spent some time this past week talking to people in Philly about what they want the city to spend money on. After all, it's their tax money. Here's what I found out. Neighborhoods like this in Northeast Philadelphia are where spending decisions made in City Hall make an impact. So we wanted to know what residents want.
I want to do something with our money for the people.
The mayor will introduce her budget on March 13th.
What do you want to see? How do you want your tax dollars used?
Well, first, it would be nice to have roads that were easier to drive on. The pothole situation is wild. 5 points. The traffic there doesn't really make a lot of sense, and nobody follows any of the rules.
The condition of roads in the city became a familiar complaint and priority for residents we talked to on our journey in Lawncrest.
What about the roads in particular?
They got so many potholes. I'm going to tell you, so I think I might pay about $200 a year For a pothole, knock my alignment out of my car.
Another issue we heard often, education. Inside Fox Chase Lock and Key, Matthew Scuderi talking about the value of a specific kind of investment in schools.
Yeah, I think the trades are really rare where we need a good bit of education for a good while, at least with my generation, it was a good push for, sending kids to college right away, get the real good office job and whatnot. But there's just so many jobs out there now, blue collar and whatnot, that are, as equally as important.
Investments in education were part of Mayor Parker's first year in office. So was a push to remove abandoned cars. That issue is still one that Sean Jerry would put resources into this year.
I say spending money on towing all these unpaid cars, cars that's parked, is not used, it's just sitting there.
As for the vehicles on the roads,
traffic, too much traffic.
The mayor introduces her budget proposal on March 13th, and then that kicks off a process of budget hearings and a vote by city council. We'll be right back after this with more NBC10 at Issue.
This is NBC10 at Issue.
Last week here on NBC10 at Issue, we brought you an interview with SEPTA's interim CEO. He discussed how the transit agency is nearing what they call a death spiral and had details about the service cuts and fare increases that could happen if SEPTA does not get the funding it says it needs. We only had time to bring you a portion of that conversation on NBC10 at Issue, but you can catch the full interview on one of the latest episodes of my Battleground Politics podcast. You can find new episodes on our NBC10.com website, on our NBC Philadelphia YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcasts. That does it for this edition of NBC10 at Issue. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.